The Krell Empire had conquered 47 star systems before they encountered something they could not simply destroy. In the deepest reaches of the Andromeda sector, they found beings of pure energy that called themselves the Architects. These entities existed beyond normal matter, shaping reality with thoughts alone. They had created worlds, nurtured civilizations, and considered themselves the gardeners of the universe. The Krell, in their endless hunger for expansion, saw only obstacles. The war lasted 3 generations. Conventional weapons passed through the Architects like wind through fog. Energy blasts were absorbed and redirected. Nuclear fire was contained and snuffed out. The Architects were patient, nearly immortal, and seemed genuinely puzzled by the Krell's aggression. They tried communication, offering wisdom and partnership. The Krell responded with more violence. High Commander Zephyk stood in the weapons laboratory, his 4 eyes fixed on the device before him. It hummed with power, contained within a sphere of dark matter no larger than his head. Around him, scientists in protective suits monitored readings that would have driven lesser minds to madness. The numbers on their screens represented forces that should not exist in normal space. "The calculations are complete," said lead scientist Vrom, her voice trembling with exhaustion and pride. "We can wound them now. We can make them bleed in ways they never imagined possible." The weapon had no proper name. The scientists simply called it the Unmaker. It functioned by creating localized zones of entropy, accelerating the heat death of the universe in a confined space. Nothing could exist within its field. Not matter, not energy, not even the fabric of space-time itself. When tested on a small moon, the celestial body simply ceased to be, leaving behind not even dust or radiation. It had been erased from existence. "How many can we produce?" Zephyk asked. "With our current resources, perhaps 24 within a year. Each one requires materials we must harvest from dying stars. The process is expensive and dangerous. Make 100. Strip every dying star in our territory if you must. The Architects have held the Veil Nebula for too long. That region contains resources we need." Vrom nodded, though doubt flickered in her expression. "Commander, the Architects have done nothing to provoke this escalation. They have only defended their territory. Perhaps we should reconsider." "I did not ask for your political opinions, scientist. I asked for weapons. Deliver them." 6 months later, the Krell fleet moved into the Veil Nebula, with 40 Unmaker devices loaded onto specialized carriers. The Architects appeared as they always did, vast and luminous, their forms shifting between shapes as they tried to communicate. The Krell fleet commander did not wait for translation. He gave the order, and the first Unmaker activated. The effect was immediate and terrible. The Architect caught in the field did not die so much as stop existing. Its consciousness, which had persisted for millions of years, simply ended. The other Architects recoiled, and for the first time in recorded history, they attacked with intent to kill. Reality itself became a weapon as they twisted space and time. But the Krell had prepared for this. Their ships were shielded with experimental technology designed to resist reality manipulation. The battle was brutal and costly, but the Krell won. They always won. 12 Architects were unmade that day. The survivors fled deeper into unknown space, and the Krell claimed the Veil Nebula. They found what they sought: exotic matter, rare elements, and energy sources beyond conventional understanding. The military celebrated. The scientists did not. They had seen what their weapons could do, and they understood they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Zephyk was promoted to Supreme Commander. He oversaw the expansion into the former Architect territories, establishing mining operations and military outposts. The Unmakers were refined, made smaller and more efficient. Within a decade, the Krell had a fleet of ships equipped with God-killing weapons, and they had the arrogance to match. It was in this state of supreme confidence that they encountered the human ship. The vessel appeared on their sensors at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, a recently claimed Krell territory. It was small, perhaps 100 meters long, with a design that seemed almost primitive. Chemical rockets for thrust, metal hull plates welded together in an almost artisan fashion, and power readings that barely registered above background radiation. The ship broadcast a simple message in multiple languages, none of which the Krell recognized at first. "This is the research vessel Discovery. We come in peace from Earth. We mean no harm and request permission to study the fourth planet in this system. We will not interfere with any operations currently underway." Captain Vex of the Krell patrol ship Dominator read the translation with amusement. "Another species that does not know who rules here. Send the standard warning." The communications officer complied. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Krell space without authorization. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction." There was a pause. Then the human ship responded. "We were not aware this system was claimed. Our maps show no settlement here. Could we speak with a diplomatic representative? We're happy to leave peacefully." "They asked to negotiate," the communications officer said. Vex considered this. The ship was clearly no threat. It would take at least 100 such vessels to even scratch the Dominator's shields. But protocol was protocol. "Send a boarding party. I want to know what species is foolish enough to wander into our territory, and bring back their navigation data. I want to see how far their space extends." The boarding party consisted of 6 Krell warriors in full combat armor, armed with plasma rifles and energy shields. They took a shuttle across the void and docked with the human ship. The airlock opened without resistance, and they found themselves in a cramped corridor lit by harsh, white lights. The atmosphere was breathable, though the temperature was warmer than Krell preferred. They found the crew in what appeared to be a common area, 6 humans, dressed in simple jumpsuits, their hands raised in a gesture the Krell recognized as surrender. They were small creatures, bipedal like the Krell, but more lightly built. Their skin was various shades of brown and pink, their hair black or brown or yellow. They looked fragile, almost childlike. "I'm Captain Chen," one of them said, a woman with graying hair and steady eyes. "We really don't want any trouble. We're just scientists." The lead Krell warrior, squad leader Thex, scanned her with his helmet sensors. No weapons, no augmentations, no signs of hidden technology, just flesh and bone, and the kind of simple courage that came from ignorance. "You will come with us. Your ship will be impounded." "Can I ask why? We haven't broken any laws we know of." "You are in Krell space. That is reason enough." Captain Chen looked at her crew, then back at Thex. "Okay, we'll cooperate, but I need to ask, what happens to us now?" "That depends on what our superiors decide. If you are useful, you may live. If not," Thex let the sentence hang. The humans were transported to the Dominator and placed in a holding cell. Captain Vex reviewed the data extracted from their ship's computers. What he found was puzzling. These humans came from a single planet called Earth, located in what the Krell called the Orion Spur. Their space travel capability was limited: chemical rockets for local travel, and primitive fusion drives for interstellar journeys that took years or decades. They had only recently begun exploring systems beyond their own. They had no empire, no conquered worlds, no weapons of significance. "They are nothing," Vex concluded. "Primitives playing at exploration. Contact command and ask what to do with them." The response came swiftly. "Bring them to the nearest research station. Science Division wants to study them. Their biology may be useful." And so the 6 humans were transported deeper into Krell space, to a massive station that orbited a gas giant. They were separated, placed in individual cells, and subjected to a battery of tests: blood samples, tissue samples, cognitive assessments. The Krell scientists were thorough and completely disinterested in the humans' comfort or dignity. One of the humans, a young man named David, was chosen for more intensive study. He was placed in an observation chamber and monitored constantly. The scientists noted his physiological responses to stress, his problem-solving abilities, his emotional range. They found him unremarkable in every way. Weak by Krell standards, slow to heal, limited in sensory perception. The only notable feature was his species' apparent stubbornness. Even under duress, David maintained a certain defiant optimism that puzzled his captors. "Why do you not despair?" asked scientist Karam during one of the interrogation sessions. "You must understand that your species is insignificant. We have conquered civilizations 1,000 times more advanced than yours. We have killed beings your people would call gods. What hope could you possibly have?" David, strapped to an examination table, managed a weak smile. "Because that's what humans do. We hope. Even when it's stupid to hope, we do it anyway. It's kind of our thing." "Irrational. Your emotions override your logic." "Maybe, but we're still here, aren't we? Still exploring, still trying. Even though the universe is huge and scary and full of things that could kill us. That's got to count for something." Karam made a note on his datapad. "Your species will be extinct within a century. The Krell do not tolerate competitors, no matter how weak. Enjoy your hope while it lasts." But something unexpected happened. The research station received a priority alert from the border systems. Multiple human ships had been detected, dozens of them, all heading toward Krell space. They were not warships, but they carried a message that was broadcast on every frequency. "This is the Earth Defense Fleet. 6 of our people were taken by force from the Discovery. We demand their immediate return. We do not seek war, but we will not abandon our own. Please respond." Captain Vex, now stationed at the research facility as security chief, watched the sensor displays with disbelief. The human ships were as primitive as the first one, held together with what looked like improvised modifications. Many appeared to be converted mining vessels or transport barges, but there were 52 of them, and they showed no signs of stopping. "They are bluffing," he told the station commander. "They must know they cannot win against us." "Perhaps they do not care," the commander replied. "Activate the perimeter defense. If they cross into weapons range, destroy them." The human fleet stopped just outside the boundary. For 3 days they maintained position, broadcasting their message on repeat. The Krell tried to ignore them, but their presence was unsettling. Why would such a weak species risk confrontation? What did they hope to achieve? On the 4th day, something changed. One of the human ships broke formation and accelerated toward the station. Alarms blared. The defense systems locked on. "Wait," Vex said, studying his display. "That ship, it has no weapons, no shields. It is accelerating to ramming speed. It cannot penetrate our hull. Their technology is too primitive." Then what is their intention? They got their answer when the ship struck the station's outer shield. The impact was negligible, barely a tremor, but what happened next was not. The human ship exploded, but not with conventional explosives. It detonated a crude nuclear device, millions of times less powerful than Krell weapons, but released at point-blank range against the shield generator. The shields flickered and failed in one section. Immediately, the remaining human ships opened fire with kinetic weapons. Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds. They targeted the weakened section with surprising accuracy. Alarms screamed throughout the station as hull breaches were reported. 3 Krell died in the initial salvo, sucked into space when a corridor decompressed. "Return fire!" the commander roared. "Destroy them all!" The station's weapons came online. Plasma cannons and missile batteries engaged. The first salvo destroyed 8 human ships outright, but the humans did not retreat. Instead, more of them accelerated toward the station, each one loaded with nuclear devices. They were turning themselves into missiles, guided by living crew who stayed at the controls until the moment of impact. Vex watched in horror as ship after ship rammed the station. Each explosion weakened the defenses further. The humans were sacrificing themselves, throwing away lives with a recklessness that seemed almost insane. But it was working. The station's shields were failing. Hull integrity was at 60% and dropping. "They are mad," Vex whispered. "What species does this?" In his cell, David heard the explosions and felt the station shudder. He did not know the details, but he understood what was happening. Humanity had come for them. The question was whether they would arrive in time. The answer came when the station commander made a decision that would echo through Krell history. With his defenses crumbling and more human ships approaching, he ordered the prisoners brought to the command center. David and his 5 crewmates were dragged from their cells and forced to their knees before a communications terminal. "Tell them to stop," the commander demanded. "Tell your fleet to stand down, or we will execute all of you." Captain Shen looked up at him with blood running from a cut on her forehead. "You don't understand us at all, do you? If you kill us, they'll just get angrier. Humans don't negotiate with kidnappers. We used to, back on Earth, but we learned it only encourages more kidnapping, so we made a rule. We don't negotiate with hostage takers. Ever. Then you will die for nothing. Maybe, but you'll remember us. Every species you meet from now on, you'll wonder if they're like us. If they'll chase you across the galaxy for taking one of their own, you'll never feel safe again." The commander raised his weapon, but Vex stepped forward. "Commander, wait. Look at the displays. They have stopped firing. They are hailing us." On the screen appeared a human woman in a military uniform. Her expression was cold and controlled. "Krell Station, this is Admiral Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. We have disabled your shields and can destroy your facility. But we are not here for revenge. We are here for our people. Release them, and we will leave your space and never return. Refuse, and we will show you exactly how humans fight when you threaten our families." The commander's hand shook. He was trained for combat against equals or inferiors. He had expected negotiation or surrender or even brave last stands, but not this. Not this absolute refusal to accept loss. "You cannot defeat the Krell Empire. We will hunt your species to extinction for this attack." "Maybe," Admiral Torres said, "but right now in this moment, we're the ones who disabled your station. We're the ones who proved we'll fly through your weapons to reach our own. So ask yourself, is your pride worth finding out what else we're willing to do?" The silence stretched. Then the commander lowered his weapon. "Take them. Take your people and leave. But know this, the Krell will remember humanity, and we do not forget insults." "Neither do we," Torres replied. "Neither do we." Within an hour, the 6 humans were transferred to the Earth fleet. The human ships withdrew, moving slowly back toward their own space. The Krell watched them go, and for the first time in their history of conquest, they felt something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. A recognition that the universe contained more than gods and conquerors. It contained humans, who fought with a ferocity born not from power, but from love. In the weeks that followed, Zefik studied the reports from the border station. He read the analysis of human psychology, their social structures, their history. What he found disturbed him more than any god-killing weapon. Humans were weak individually, but they formed bonds that transcended logic. They would die for strangers of their own species. They held grudges across generations. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars that nearly destroyed their world, and each time they had rebuilt stronger than before. "They are persistent," Zefik said to Vrom, who had been summoned to his office. "Like a virus that adapts to every cure. Should we eliminate them now, while they are still weak?" Zefik considered this. The logical answer was yes. But logic had not accounted for ships full of humans flying into certain death just to save 6 of their own. Logic had not predicted the kind of determination that turns civilian vessels into weapons. "No, we will watch them, study them, and we will never, ever underestimate them again. You think they are a threat? I think they are something we have never encountered before. They have no gods to kill, no grand technology to overcome. They have only themselves, and that might make them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Vrom left, and Zephyk stood alone in his office, looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, humans were returning to their homeworld. They would tell stories of their rescue, and those stories would spread. They would build more ships, develop better technology, and push further into space. And when they met the Krell again, because they inevitably would, they would remember how this first encounter ended. The Krell had built weapons to kill gods, but gods, for all their power, could be killed. Humans were different. Humans were survivors. And Zephyk suspected that no weapon ever designed could truly end something that refused to stay dead. The research station was repaired over the following months. The damaged sections were rebuilt, and new shield generators were installed. But the scars remained, not in the metal and composite, but in the minds of those who had been there. The Krell crew members spoke in hushed tones about the humans who had turned their bodies into weapons, who had flown through plasma fire without hesitation. David and his crewmates returned to Earth as heroes. They gave interviews, shared their experiences, and warned their people about the Krell. The Earth governments, fractured and argumentative as always, found rare unity in their response. Humanity would not be prey. Resources were redirected to defense and space exploration. The old rivalries did not disappear, but they were set aside in favor of a greater goal, ensuring that no human would ever be taken again without consequences. Captain Chen retired from space exploration and took a position teaching at the Naval Academy. Her lectures on first contact protocols became legendary, always ending with the same message. The universe is not kind. It does not care about our dreams or our rights. But we care. We care about each other, and that makes all the difference. Admiral Torres became a figure of both respect and controversy. Some praised her for bringing the crew home without starting a full-scale war. Others criticized the lives lost in the rescue attempt. She accepted both the praise and criticism with equal stoicism. In her private moments, she visited the families of those who had died in the rescue. She knew their names, their stories, their reasons for volunteering. 23 humans had died to save 6. The mathematics seemed cruel, but Torres understood what others did not. It was never about the numbers. It was about the principle. Abandon one human, and you created a precedent that would haunt the species forever. The Krell, meanwhile, continued their expansion, but with new caution. When their scouts detected human ships in neutral space, they observed but did not engage. When human colonies began appearing on unclaimed worlds, the Krell marked those systems as contested and moved on to easier targets. It was not fear, they told themselves. It was strategic prudence. Why waste resources on a species that fought with such irrational determination? But in the darker corners of Krell space, in the bars where off-duty soldiers gathered, the stories spread. Stories of the humans who had attacked a military station with mining ships. Stories of entire crews who had piloted bombs into shields without hesitation. The stories grew in the telling, becoming legends that parents used to frighten children and officers used to motivate troops. Fight like you are facing humans became a common saying, meaning to fight without holding back, without assuming victory was certain. Zephyk rose higher in the military hierarchy. He became the supreme commander of all Krell forces, overseeing fleets that patrolled dozens of systems. He never forgot the lesson of the border station. In his strategic planning, he always included a variable he called the human factor, the possibility that an enemy would act irrationally, sacrificing everything for intangible goals like honor or loyalty. It made his calculations more complex, but more accurate. The Krell won more battles under his leadership because he accounted for what logic alone could not predict. Years passed. The human sphere of influence grew slowly but steadily. They established colonies, built orbital habitats, and sent exploration vessels to distant systems. They encountered other species, some friendly, some hostile. In each case, they approached with a mixture of hope and caution, offering peace but prepared for war. Word spread through the galactic community that humans were a new player, small but fierce, naive but determined. A decade after the border station incident, Zefik attended a summit of galactic powers. It was a rare gathering held on a neutral station administered by the ancient Koru, a species so old they barely interacted with younger civilizations. The purpose of the summit was to discuss the architect question. The survivors of that species had resurfaced, appearing in remote systems and asking for sanctuary. Several smaller powers had granted it, but the Krell demanded extradition. The architects had resources the Krell wanted, and more importantly, they represented unfinished business. To Zefik's surprise, the humans sent a delegation. It was led by an older man named Ambassador Phillips, who carried himself with quiet dignity. The humans had no military power at the summit, no leverage in the traditional sense, but they spoke anyway. The architects have asked for sanctuary, and we believe it should be granted, Phillips said, addressing the assembly. They are not criminals, they are refugees. Whatever conflict they had with the Krell is over. Let it end. Zefik stood to respond. The humans have no stake in this matter. The architects occupy space that was promised to the Krell by right of conquest. This is not your concern. It became our concern when we learned what you did to them, Phillips replied. You did not just defeat them, you erased them from existence. That is not war, that is extermination. And humanity has learned the hard way that extermination, once accepted, becomes easier the next time. We have seen this in our own history. We will not be silent while it happens to others. Brave words from a species that can barely defend its own worlds. What will you do if we ignore your protest? Send more mining ships to ram our stations? Phillips smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. If necessary, but I hope it does not come to that. I hope that the Krell, for all their power, can recognize when they have won enough. You have 47 conquered systems. You have resources beyond measure. You have weapons that can kill gods. What more do you need? Everything. We will settle for nothing less than everything. Then you will eventually fail, because everything is not a goal. It is an addiction. And like all addictions, it will consume you. The debate continued for hours. In the end, the summit reached a compromise. The architects would be granted limited sanctuary in systems far from Krell space, but they would surrender all territorial claims and provide the Krell with specified resources as reparation. It was not a perfect solution, but it avoided immediate war. After the summit, Zefik found himself in an observation lounge, looking out at the stars. Phillips entered and stood beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. You think we are weak, Phillips finally said. I understand why. By your standards, we are. But strength is not just about weapons or territory. It is about resilience. It is about the ability to endure loss and continue forward. Humanity has endured. We have fallen and risen again, more times than you can imagine. That is our strength. And you think that makes you our equals? No, but it makes us survivors. And in the long run, survivors outlast conquerors, because conquerors always eventually run out of things to conquer. Zefik turned to face him. Is that a threat? It is an observation. The universe is vast, Commander. There is room for both of us. We do not need to be enemies. We are not enemies. Enemies imply equality. You are simply in our way. Phillips nodded slowly. Then I suppose time will tell which of us is right. Good evening, Commander. He left, and Zefik remained at the window. He thought about Phillips's words, about survival and conquest. The Krell had built an empire on strength, on the ability to destroy anything that opposed them. But they had never faced an enemy that simply refused to be destroyed. The architects had been powerful, but passive. Other species had fought, but eventually surrendered. Humans were different. They lost battles, but never seemed to accept defeat. They adapted, learned, and came back stronger. It was inefficient. It was illogical. It was dangerous. Zefik made a decision then. He would recommend to the High Council that humanity be left alone, not out of fear, but out of pragmatism. The cost of conquering them would be high, and the benefit uncertain. Better to let them grow in their small corner of the galaxy where they could not interfere with Krell interests. It was the logical choice. But in his heart, Zefik knew the truth. He was afraid, not of human weapons or technology, but of human will. The Krell had built weapons to kill gods, and they had succeeded. But humans had built something harder to destroy, a culture that refused to accept extinction. No weapon could unmake that. The years continued to pass, and the predictions made by both Zefik and Phillips slowly came true. The Krell Empire expanded, but found its growth slowing. Each new conquest was harder than the last. Each subjugated species required more resources to control. The empire became bloated and bureaucratic. Its military stretched thin across too many systems. Humanity, meanwhile, grew steadily. Their technology improved. Their colonies multiplied. They formed alliances with other small powers, species that feared Krell expansion and saw in humanity a potential ally. These alliances were fragile and complicated, but they held. Humans had a gift for diplomacy born from centuries of internal conflict. They understood compromise in a way the Krell never had. A turning point came when the Krell attempted to expand into the Tori cluster, a region rich in rare minerals. They expected minimal resistance. Instead, they found a coalition waiting for them. Humans, Koru, Jackson, and a dozen other species had formed a defensive pact. The fleet that met the Krell was smaller and less advanced, but it was coordinated in ways Krell forces were not. The battle was brutal and inconclusive. The Krell withdrew to regroup, and the coalition claimed victory. It was not a defeat, Zefik told the High Council. It was a tactical retreat. But the truth was harder to deny. The Krell had been stopped for the first time in their history, and at the center of the coalition was humanity, providing strategic planning and inspiring others with their impossible determination. Zefik, now ancient by Krell standards, retired from military service. He spent his final years writing a memoir that became required reading at Krell military academies. In it, he detailed his encounters with humanity and offered a warning to future generations. "We built weapons to kill gods," he wrote. "We believed that power was everything, that the strong inevitably triumphed over the weak. But we learned that strength alone is not enough. The humans taught us this. They showed us that will, determination, and unity can overcome advantages in technology and numbers. They are not gods. They are not even particularly powerful by galactic standards. But they are survivors. And in the endless struggle of existence, survival matters more than dominance. I do not know if humanity will one day surpass us, but I know this: they will never be conquered. And that makes them unique in all the galaxy." The memoir was controversial. Some saw it as the wisdom of experience. Others saw it as defeatism. But no one could deny the central truth. The galaxy had changed. The age of easy conquest was over. Species were learning to work together, to resist subjugation, and at the heart of that resistance was a small, stubborn species from a blue world called Earth. Captain Chen, now white-haired and walking with a cane, gave her final lecture at the Naval Academy. The auditorium was packed with young officers eager to hear from the legendary survivor of the border station incident. "You want to know the secret of humanity," she told them. "Why we survive when others fall. It is simple, really. We care. We care about each other more than we care about winning, more than we care about being right. We know we are small and weak in a vast and dangerous universe, but we also know we are not alone. Every human who has ever lived is connected to every other human through bonds of shared experience and shared struggle. When the Krell took me and my crew, we were not special. We were not important in any cosmic sense, but we were human. And that meant other humans would come for us, no matter the cost. That is our strength. That is why we will endure. The students applauded, and Chen smiled. She had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. She had been held prisoner, studied like a laboratory animal, and offered as a hostage to prevent war. But she had also seen the best. Humans flying into certain death to rescue 6 strangers, species across the galaxy finding courage in humanity's example, and an empire that could kill gods being forced to reconsider its path. As she left the auditorium, a young officer approached her. "Captain, do you think we will ever be as powerful as the Krell?" Chen considered the question. Power is relative. We may never have their weapons or their territory, but we have something they do not. We have each other. And in the end, that matters more than any weapon ever designed. The Krell built tools to kill gods. We built a civilization that refuses to die. Which do you think is more impressive? The young officer smiled. Definitely us. Then go prove it. Explore the galaxy. Make friends. Make peace when possible and war when necessary. But never, ever forget who you are. You are human. That means something. Chen walked out into the sunlight of Earth, feeling the warm breeze on her face. Somewhere in the distant stars, the Krell were watching. Somewhere in those same stars, humans were exploring, building, and surviving. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, full of species that had forgotten or never learned the value of compassion. But humanity remembered. And as long as one human drew breath, the lesson would spread. You can build weapons to kill gods, but you cannot kill the spirit of a species that refuses to surrender. The story of humanity's first encounter with the Krell became legend. It was told and retold, embellished and analyzed, studied by military strategists and diplomats alike. But at its core, the story remained simple. 23 humans had died to save 6, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. They had proven that sometimes the greatest weapon is not the one that destroys, but the one that endures. And humanity, for all its flaws and weaknesses, knew how to endure. In the end, the Krell learned what others would eventually learn. You can conquer territory, you can seize resources, you can even kill gods, but you cannot conquer the human spirit. It will adapt, survive, and ultimately outlast any weapon ever designed. Because humanity's greatest strength was never in its weapons or technology. It was in its absolute, stubborn, beautiful refusal to give up. Ever. And that, more than any god-killing device, was something truly impossible to destroy.